Welcome to another episode of The Disruptors, where we're arming you with the tools you need to innovate within the physical therapy space by highlighting those who have come before you. I'm your host, Stephen Cohen. Now, let's get into it. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Disruptors, where we're highlighting those who are innovating within the world of physical therapy. Today, I am blessed to be joined by Dr. Michael Nula. Michael is the founder of Nula Training Systems, a business coaching and professional development firm helping private practices around the country. As the founder and former CEO of Elite Physical Therapy for 20 years, Michael led the award-winning company to 15 locations, serving over 60,000 patients before integrating the firm into the Ivy Rehab Network, a world-class national physical therapy network partner. He's a passionate father of 3 daughters. With his wife, they play zone defense and is always looking for the opportunity to help teams win. And so with that, Dr. Michael Nula, welcome to the Disruptors. I'm really excited to have you on today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Stephen.
So we're going to go jump right into it. Why did you go get that DPT? Why physical therapy for you?
Yeah, my aha moment started in high school. I had some bad knee pain and was being told at that time that I had patella tendonitis. And playing through that at the beginning of my senior year, it just made things worse. And so I sought out another consultation and learned that I actually tore my patella tendon. So that ended my basketball career at that time. And I spent the rest of my senior year in physical therapy. But, I'm thankful for that experience now. I never would have said this back at 17 years old, but I'm thankful now because I realize where I belong. I love the idea of helping people, always like science, and always big into fitness, health. So looked around and thought to myself, this is definitely where I want to be. And at that time, though, interestingly, I was going to a hospital setting for physical therapy. And while it was good, I learned another lesson that not all physical therapy is the same. So I had this idea, someday I want to own my own practice. I've got some thoughts and ideas on the way the standard should be and the way the experience should flow. And I've taken that throughout all my years and all my seasons professionally, is thinking about that patient experience, remembering what it felt like, scared, uncertain, and confused back at 17. And again, having a good experience, but always thinking there's better than good. How can it be exceptional? How can it be, as we say here in New England, wicked awesome?
I love that. I love that there's better than good. I think it's just a good quote, right? Of not striving just to be good, right? No one strives for goodness; they should be striving for greatness. So I really like there's better than good, and I know we met through a mutual customer of ours, and so that's why you got into PT. But can you expand on the why behind what you're doing today with Nula Training Systems?
Yeah. So, my first career out of college was a high school science teacher. So at that time, to be quite honest, I always admired what my mother was doing teaching. She had a whole career as a high school Spanish teacher at the time. And I thought to myself, this would be a nice next step. Even though I know I want to do physical therapy, I want to own my own practice one day, this would be a nice next step. Let me go teach for a while. I always admired the relationship she had with her students and so much fulfillment. And so taught 10th grade biology for 2 years and was a girls basketball coach. And at that time, I think it just reinstalled this passion for learning, this lifelong commitment to learning, the teaching process. And so I took those experiences and brought them forward into my leadership style, and always had this sort of teacher focus and people development focus. And as the years went by in my own practice, that was my favorite part of my practice, was the developing people and having this leadership approach to where it's teaching, it's coaching, it's mentoring, it's guiding. And had this vision. I'm like, wow, this could be just a great thing to go work with private practices across the country, working with them in terms of how they're approaching running their practice and developing their people. And I love this industry. I love this profession. So after 20 years of my own practice and growing to 15 locations, I've just felt this real passion and pull to just go help the profession wherever I'm needed. I want to work with, whatever size the practice is, whatever they're trying to do. Happy to help them get there.
Oh, I think it's fantastic. And as I'm sure you've experienced on your side, that many practice owners that I meet are great clinicians, but struggle to make that transition into the business owner, right? And that can be really tough. And maybe you have some training around this, maybe not. So I might be putting you on the spot a little bit, but the goal of this podcast is to help make innovation and leadership just like one step closer, right? Just a little bit more accessible, right? And so as you've seen that your clients transition have a lot of trouble in the transition from practitioner to business owner, sometimes with a slash there. What did either you teach your rising stars who became clinic directors and went off, or what do you wish these practice owners that you work with would have been taught on their way up, right? Like, where are some of those like one or two key lessons that are just missed?
Yeah, I'm glad we're talking about this. So I've always been committed to learning, right? So it obviously started out clinically, and then very early on started taking business courses, seminars, workshops, reading books, podcasts. So my jokes through the years is I've gone through all that boring stuff so that I can really just unpack it and plug play and help people like kind of cut to the chase, right? Sort of the cliff notes of it. But what I'd want to pass along is recognize, I mean, to build your business, there needs to be a focus in building your people. And it's great to do the continuing education for clinical development. Absolutely. We should always be staying current and learning how to become better clinicians. But there's these other competencies that exist in being a leader in today's PT practice that starts at the top as a practice owner and then trickles down to leadership. And then recognizing that we want to identify people to become leaders so that we don't bottleneck the organization, right? A lot of practices maybe are leaning on just one or two people. And the reality is the practice can't thrive if it's just running through two people. We think of how, I mean, let's look at physiology, right? And how the blood circulates through the body. If there's plaque buildup in vessels, it restricts blood flow. So if we're restricting how moving parts like workflows and day-to-day activity are happening, that if it's getting blocked up because it's trying to fit through just one or two vessels, for lack of better words, I mean, it really can back things up and, result in total overwhelm on the practice owner or other leaders. And then the way that trickles down is the environment's not thriving as well as it could be.
Absolutely. Gosh, I mean, we saw that all the time, and I think as we've talked, I'm not a clinician, right? I don't come from the clinical side. I have other people on my team, on the executive team, that make sure that that's well accounted for. But I mean, that is that's the first one of the first laws of manufacturing, right? Is don't operate for very long above 80 to 85% capacity, or else things break, and they break bad. Especially once you get into the 90%, and like, oh well, that's manufacturing, like that's different. Like, no, it's not. It's really not, right? If you come to work and your 40 hours or however many you have, 36 of those are already allocated, like one emergency, one, right? And if you don't have redundant systems in place to be able to handle that, then no one can take vacation. No one feels good. Like, a lot of bad things happen. So I'm there with you, and I'm glad that you're helping practice leaders understand the gravity of the situation.
Yeah. So it's, empowering them to empower their people, right? Look to develop them, look for courses that develop their competencies, look for learnings, whether they're books, they're podcasts. I mean, there's just so much out there. Of course, I'm excited about some of the courses that my group offers, but at the same token, it's more about, discover your why, discover the purpose, what's the overarching mission and vision, and look for those learnings that can reinforce and strengthen that, or expand like how they look at that, right? Like, is there clarity on their vision, or is it just full of clouds and murky and you can't really think past today or this week? And that's okay if that's where you're at. Just get honest about it, and what's one more step we can do to look a little further past that, right?
I like that. And, as someone who, I mean, honestly, has struggled with finding like what's my current why, or like what is my why, right? And I'm starting to better understand that, but it's an evolving, very difficult journey. What are there any high level tips for people that are willing to do the work, right? And you say, hey, if you're looking to figure out your why, if you're passionate about data but you don't understand why, like how would you coach some of, especially your staff level folks? Like, hey, here's some good questions to ponder, or even if you had like a, maybe this is too much to ask, right? And if you can't give it away, I get that too, right? Like, hey, staff PT, you're 2 to 4 years out of school, right? Like, is it a 10-hour process? Like, it's probably going to be a 10 to 100-hour process to go through this, right? With these types of stuff, like how would you think about guiding somebody and helping them on their process of figuring out their why?
Yeah, I think there's something just fundamentally that anchors us, first as a team, as an organization, but then each role has a little, like it's dialed in just a little bit more on the purpose of the role. My world lives in basketball. I love the NBA. I love basketball. I find the more I make analogies to basketball and the NBA, the more I make sense of things. So when I look at private practice or just look at physical therapy as an industry, to me, it's a sport. And we have teams. And what happens with teams when there's confusion of role clarity, like who's bringing the ball up the court, who's rebounding, who's going to tie up the middle. Like those are things we have to visit quite regularly so that the team can be where they need to be and win basketball games, right? So same thing in physical therapy, and quite frankly, any industry is, be clear with roles, be clear with where the spacing, like let's get a space and pace offense here. Let's pace ourselves and not try to go manic where we're doing so much one week and nothing the next week. How do we space activity, space workflow, and then pace ourselves with that and have this pacing where there's this cadence of communication, touching base with each other. Where are you at? What are you focused on? Cool. Now we're next week. Where did you leave off? Where are you at? What do you need from me? And it's this sort of balance. But all that can tie up then again, staying true to the purpose of the company and the role, and hopefully we're thinking of something bigger. I find that if we think of like a vision and a game that's bigger than just a job or just coming into work, I think it powers us on those tough days, so really getting big with the why,
I like that. I like that, and making it, a good tactical, I guess, piece of advice that I'm kind of like bit of conjecture coming out of that is, why do you come back after a hard day, right? And that's probably a really good place to start. Of, hey, you had a rough day yesterday. Like, why are you back here today? Why didn't you just say quit, right? And I'm sure it's like, well, I need the paycheck, right? I think that could be it, but there's typically more than that, right?
That's
And,
right.
and so that's maybe there's like a Dr. Michael Nula like bad day test, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could that's yours. Because ideas are not worth much as the execution, right? But I really like that framing of, what do you do after a bad day, and coming back for that why. But I also appreciate how much focus that you put onto the importance of that clarity of role and clarity of company vision. But that's at the practice leader level, right? Like they need to
That's
dial
right.
that in.
And
Is
then I
that
like to I
something?
like, I like to remind practice owners too, or the leaders, like it's not all on them. There's a nice way to engage the group and unpack that together. Ideally, we're hiring people that are like-minded, that like values, sort of have shared philosophy of how we like to roll, approach our work day, take care of people, take care of each other. So just engaging the group, you can get so much, by working together. I'm all about collaboration and teamwork. Back to basketball, like you can't win games and win championships doing it all by yourself. So how do we move the ball around? How do we share the ball? And how do we recognize that everybody comes with their talents, their gifts, their ideas? How do we create a safe space to really toke that fire of collaboration and lead with curiosity? Like, let's not be all judgmental on each other and criticizing. Why don't we just be like pretty kind and compassionate about it? I know it sounds cheesy, but be like, man, hey, Stephen, that was a really good idea. And if we don't really know where you're going with that, just ask, like, could you give me a little more color on that, a little context? Seems like a neat idea, but I'm still kind of confused on where you're going with that. Versus like, what's that all about? Right? All judgmental, where then Steven shuts down and he's like, you know what, forget it. I don't know what I was talking
I'm
about.
done. I'm out.
I'm done.
Yep.
And then it's like mental note, I'm never sharing again. I think that can stall organizations, right? And constrict them too.
Thank you for listening to this episode. This would not be possible without the sponsorship of SaRA Health. SaRA is the relationship operating system for physical therapy practices, driving better patient outcomes, improved arrival rate, and improved financial margins. If you'd like to learn more, check them out at SaRA, SaRA Health.com, SaRAHealth.com. And if you'd be interested in advertising with us and helping us produce even more great stories, please let us know at Steven@SaRAHealth.com. Now, back to the episode. There's a book that I love called The Happiness Advantage by Sean Achor. Absolutely fantastic, and brings data to support his argument, right? That you can do better if you're happier, right? And not like in a forced happiness type of way, but like in everything, like everything's great and it's not, but it truly like going through celebrating successes and doing some of those things. As you say, lead with kindness. It makes me think of that. When you started Elite, is this something that you always had dialed in, or do you have your own set of scars from running your own practice? Like, talk to us a little bit about your journey as a leader and running Elite.
Yeah, I think there's a few experiences that stand out that shaped how I led, with my leadership style, but also my vision. And, and again, it started with me getting that injury in high school, tearing my patella tendon, then having the opportunity to be a high school teacher and a girls basketball coach. Then I worked for a large healthcare group right out of graduate school. And I think I'm grateful that I had that experience because I learned so much in a short amount of time. But I also learned some things that I didn't want to do or see professionally for the someday when I have my own practice. Excuse me. So that was very eye-opening. So at times perhaps where I didn't have the answer, I thought to myself, well, what should I not do? Right.
Yep.
And then that sometimes would guide what we should do. And then it's realizing like all the learning is through the experiences. I think in the beginning years, there's this idea we have to get everything right. And the reality is there's so much learning that's going on in the beginning of any endeavor or venture, no matter what our learning experiences are prior. So just being okay with that and accepting that, that there is no such thing as perfection. Let's strive for excellence. Absolutely. And then these moments where we feel like things didn't go ideally, or we had that tough day, like where's the learning on that? What did we learn out of that? How can we grow? And then how can we let it go? So we're not carrying that forward and going back. Remember that time 2 years ago? It's like, man, we're done. We already reviewed the film. We learned everything we could off that. Now we get on with it,
I love that. There's a book I'm reading right now called Arate by Brian Johnson.
I just got that book. I'm starting to go through it too. Yes.
Oh, you're going to love it, right? Did you win or did you learn? Right. And that is a framing I think is so powerful and yet so correct, right? As I'm sure you've seen now, running two very, very different businesses. Like, yes, the core industry is the same, but it's a very different business to deliver care and basically deliver like knowledge, right? Those are two very, very different things.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I'm sure you've had your doses of learning, as I definitely had as well, right?
And I always I remind people too, like we can have our feelings on all this stuff. It's not always sunshine and rainbows. And when we lose, we don't like to lose. But, like all the great athletes always say, like you have to lose in order to know what it is to win and to appreciate the winning, right? And you can't win without the losing, right? So there really is no failure. It's just learning, and it's like the not now is also the reframing too. If it didn't go our way, it's like, okay, well, it's just not now, but it's coming, right? And being really like committed to that. And ideally, I hope it's coming sooner than later, but it's coming,
Absolutely. I was talking to a mentor of mine, and he was telling me about how he hires, and he does a pretty unique business where they basically try to find entrepreneurs and put them into portfolio companies that they acquire or majority acquire. And I was asking him like, okay, what do you look for? And he said, I look for a loss on that resume. I actually really want to see that because I know that they learned a ton from that. Like you learn a ton from that versus if I see someone that, hey, they started at DoorDash, right, at their Series B, and was promoted and all that, and then DoorDash IPO'd. Like, was it because of them or in spite of them? Like, you'll never know, right? You're potentially, be very hard to tease that out. But if you have a failure, you say, hey, this failed because of X, Y, and Z. Here's what I would do differently. I would do A, B, and C. Oof, like that is a strong message.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, and then you're giving authority to the group, like, hey, it's okay to not be perfect, you know, but do be excellent. Excellent means like I'm committed to go learn right now with whatever I need to learn. If there's something that I think could have gone better, I want to figure that out so that I don't repeat the same less than desirable outcome. And if anything, I just do it a little bit better next time. And then there's the next time to do that even a little bit better. And then now you've got that Kobe Bryant Mamba mentality, right? You just keep trying to get better every day. That's really the simplicity of what he was always about, you know?
Just one degree, right? As you'll come to read in Arte, that I think that's really important for people to hear, right? Is to not be afraid of failure. Now, that comes with a caveat, like anything else, right? It lives on some level of a scale and a dichotomy where there's too much risk to take, or you can act unethically, right? Like, but if it's a reasonable risk done ethically, it's going to be recoverable from. I
Absolutely.
think, and so yeah, and gosh, I've had more failures in this business than I care to count or relive.
Yeah, but
Right?
if we're winning more than we're losing, then at the end of every year, it's another good year. And isn't that really like what it is to win championships? All these professional teams, they don't go through the whole season undefeated. Like each week, they've got some wins, they've got some losses as the weeks go by, as the months go by, et cetera. So, but at the end of the year, they've won more than they've lost, right? And then
Yep.
it's put them in a position to make a playoff run, and then ideally, maybe even a championship.
That's it. Wait, in your normally I focus on like the advice more to like the staff clinician or those that want to innovate, but I'm just finding where this conversation is going. I want to take it a bit of a different way. As a practice leader and now a practice leader coach, what I'll start at that level and then I want to work down. What are 1 to 2 things that you consistently see? Actually, I'll do one and one. What is an activity or trait you consistently see good practice leaders get right that inspires innovation?
Communication, 100%. They're,
Communication.
they're always working on their communication, how they organize their communication, how they deliver it, right? Talking points, thinking of the outcome first. What's the intention? What's the outcome? Desired outcome? What's the purpose for said communication? Get that really dialed in, so that way, like after the delivery of it, it actually creates what you wanted, right? So being
Yeah.
very organized with our communication. I think
Communication.
that's tops on the list.
Okay. And then the flip side of that is what is the one negative trait or characteristic you're like, stop doing that?
Mm,
The thing
I
that
know
stifles
stop's a
innovation.
hard request, but like the idea of being impatient, like it's hard to say, hey, Stephen, listen, man, stop being impatient. But how about, um, Stephen, could you please be a little more patient? Like that's an easier ask. And we keep striving to be more patient with ourselves, start there, patient with each other, and then patient with things bigger like community, industry, society. I mean, we don't have this magic wand like Harry Potter that we can just wave. I know we were talking about a conversation earlier about having a magic wand. We'll see where that question comes, but we have to be patient. But that's something that to continue to work on. As I say that out loud, there's things I can be more patient on too. And I'm committed to be, continue to work on being patient. Right. And having families, that's definitely good practice. That's like an ongoing workshop. Right. And as just when you kind of master it, then the kids get older and then you've got to kind of get some adaptations and relearn some things. But significant other, parents, siblings, all the learning opportunities are right there to develop and hone in on those skills and competencies.
Oh, absolutely. And I find myself consistently going back to a single quote when it comes to patience, and that is the one credited to Philo of Alexandria, right? Of be kind, for everyone around you is fighting a great battle. It does just irritate my wife to no end when I won't get mad at people in traffic. Uh, she and
Sure.
she feels like everyone should know that they did something wrong, and I have a different mentality about it, uh, and that's a small microcosm, but the patience piece, because there's two parts to that, right? There's both patience and business, right? And time needs to elapse in order for things to happen. You need time to elapse for trust to get built. Now that there are things you can do to speed that up, but like you need time to elapse, you need reps, you need those things to occur in order to build towards, to grow towards what you're building, but also with people, right? And understanding that growth is not something you typically plot on a perfectly linear curve, right? And it's undulating, but as long as it's up and to the right, then everything is okay. Um, I I like that for as for more of the staff PT, right? What is a character trait, or what is either a character trait or activity that whenever you saw it when you're in clinic and you teach your practice leaders now, whenever you see this, hey, like go after that. Like what are one or two character traits that staff PTs can exhibit that just get you really excited about their growth?
I'm always excited by the level of generosity they have towards their patients. And by
Mm,
generosity, it doesn't mean that they're coming in giving them gifts and all these little goodies. It's generosity with their time and attention, and those are big add value points, because there's a way to stay in the pocket with a patient just a little bit longer, and not be so quick to have to get on to documenting the note and getting to the next treatment. It's being willing to stay there and be generous with the moment, and pick up on the cues, the nonverbal cues. Being generous with, like, man, they just rolled their eyes or they looked away. Like, why not follow up with a question? Be like, Stephen, did I pass through something a little fast, or did I say something that you got a concern about or a question about? And then when they do the old, like, oh no, it's nothing. I mean, don't take that for face value. Be like, are
yep.
you sure? I'm not feeling it with the sound of your voice. And now I'm making it light. They're smiling. They're like, well, I wasn't going to say anything. It's all right. I'm a professional. Bring it on. And then they share it. And then now I've deepened the relationship. I've exercised generosity in this relationship that, like, listen, I got your back. Like, I'm with you on this process. I'm here for you. I know I have another appointment waiting after, and I have a note. I'm kind of eager to get a few things documented, but make no mistake, like, I'm here for you. I feel you. I got you. When we do those moments, I just think it's such generosity that we express, because we don't have to do that kind of stuff. Those are the hustle plays in sports. And again, physical therapy, this is a sport. It's a way to bring some hustle to our approach in patient care. And the patient will love us forever for it. They really will.
Yeah, we have a saying at SaRA, which of course we copied from somebody else, which is feedback is a gift,
It
right?
is.
It is, and people, I think people overlook this way too much. If someone is willing to give you feedback, that they have overcome a lot of like innate human behavior to give you that feedback, right? Like it is so unnatural, so uncomfortable. If you've built the relationship to that point to where they're willing to give you feedback, like it's almost always, of course, there's always exception to the rule, but almost always coming from a good place.
I love that you're sharing that, because my view on that is that's a reward for a great relationship.
Yep.
Because if they're not sharing that stuff, there's something missing in the relationship. Like, always beware of like, oh yeah, we never fight. It's a great relationship. Like, how's that a great relationship if there's never fights or disagreements? But there's a way to have boundaries with that kind of stuff, in whether it's a working or personal relationship, to, that we maintain mutual respect, but we should be able to have our disagreements and be cool about it. Like, it's a gift, thanks for the feedback, you know, and try to check our feelings about it. Like, maybe our feelings are hurt, but right now, how do we be generous? Like, it's about them. They opened up, they overcame maybe some nervousness or discomfort, right? It requires courage,
Yep.
So maybe just like, hey, thanks for your courage. I'm sure that wasn't easy to communicate because it wasn't easy to receive, but right now this is about you,
Yeah.
So like, and then stay there generously, because that's what you would like in return if you were on the other side and had to have some difficult, crucial conversation, right?
It's when a customer doesn't have anything to tell us about how we can get better, all the alarm bells are going off at that point,
Sure.
because it could be one of multiple things or multiple things, right? But none of them are good, and it probably starts with they don't feel like they can trust us, or that we deserve their trust, or we haven't built a relationship to a point where that can be delivered. And that's so we use it as a little bit of a bellwether, right? And sure, sometimes there are folks that we are in contact with quite a bit. They're like, yeah, I've told you guys like what to fix, and I'm sure you'll get there. But yeah, if it's first time and no, it's perfect, I'm like, there's no way. There's
Right. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Yeah. So, to be able to stay there generously, don't go quick to judging yourself or the other person, and just kind of stay there and just appreciate that they're trying to talk through something that's probably more difficult for them to deliver than it is for you to receive it. Right.
100%.
So,
100%. Oh, I this Michael, it's very rare that we get so many points for different groups, right? So I think we've got some lessons and some tactical pieces of advice, right? In terms of the bad day test, right? For figuring out your why, and then on the leader side, to lead with kindness, right? And be always be okay with being wrong. I think that actually applies to both the practice leader and the staff, while striving for excellence. And I think, especially for practice leaders, to understand that if they invest in their communication and their patients, they're likely to see extremely high ROI on those skills. I completely agree with that. And then, we rounded out with the discussion on generosity towards your patients, and you mentioned a couple skills around being generous with the moment and picking up on cues. And it's one of the reasons why, at least for SaRA, I don't think we will ever hire someone either on the sales or customer success side that doesn't have physical therapy experience. Like, it's just, especially the picking up on cues piece, just so good at asking why, right? I would put a physical therapist up against someone that's born and bred out of the born and raised in the Toyota production system, which came up with the 5 whys. I would put those two against each other, and gosh, that would be the nerdiest, get to the bottom of it cage match. But it's
right.
what I would pay to see.
That's great. I'd like to see it too. Let me know. Keep me posted.
Yeah, when we get a pay-per-view, maybe we might have to pay people to view. So maybe that's actually how it would have to go. But you mentioned Harry Potter earlier and the magic wand. And yes, it's come time for my favorite question. So Michael, if you had a magic wand and you could fix one thing within physical therapy, what would it be?
Yeah, that's such a big question, right? Um, you know, I'd love to fix how we can simplify how everything works in the healthcare system and where physical therapy is integrated in all of that. You can tell I'm really trying to be thoughtful with my word selection on this too. It's really evolved into quite a complex, kooky environment out there in the whole healthcare landscape, right? And so where physical therapy sits in there, we're seeing a lot of opportunities to connect better, more integrated care, like with all specialties for the betterment of the patient, having a very efficient experience in the system from the moment of what their episode to coming out the other side with a solution, where they cross that finish line led by their physical therapist. There's a lot that has to happen inside of there. So I'd love to see, I wave a magic wand and see that whole world be a lot simpler. And especially how it integrates with all the payers, that would be a lot simpler, and that the power is with all the patients and empowering them to have all the power in how they are able to navigate and collaborate with their payers, and then how the providers on the other side can have a really streamlined, simple process that's not so scrutinized, not so regulated, that just gets back to some of the core foundation and fundamentals that makes us healthcare professionals. We're highly ethical, deeply compassionate, super committed on a healthier society, and we are innately wired to do the right thing. So give us the rope to do the right thing, and trust that we're going to get it done. Put some guidelines in there, but I think we can lift a lot of regulation and complexity throughout the whole system. So I know that's a loaded answer. It's layered with some of my opinion in there too, but that's what I would wave my magic wand very thoughtfully, being like, how can we make things that much simpler and easier for everybody?
I really like the answer, and I'm glad you did. Right, that's why I ask it. Is I like to see the differences in the answer, and what you're talking about sounds like just trust, right? Like there's a lot of rules and regulations and red tape and bureaucracy that has been spun up because of bad actors, right? Okay, but this whole judging the the entire barrel of apples by one bad one is causing an immense amount of cost in the system to everybody involved,
That's right.
and it's resulting. I think that what you're talking about is the undercurrent, right, to why you're seeing clinicians exit, not even apply to PT school, right, because practice owners are so burdened down with it's not just the low reimbursement, right? It's the low reimbursement combined with the higher levels of documentation and systems that they have to pay for, and all of that to be able to even keep their doors open.
Yes.
And I don't know, and maybe it's a self-selecting process, right? To where we're typically working with very very highly capable practices and clinicians, but man, I just don't ever walk into a PT clinic that we work with, and I'm like, oh, there's no value being created here. Like you go in there, and you're like, holy cow! If anything, a lot of these payers are missing a massive opportunity because the trust between a PT and a patient is so radically different between between that patient and any other providers. If you think a patient is going to be anywhere near as open with an NP or MD as they are with a PT, I've got a bridge to sell you. It's just it's not.
It's pretty special, no
It's
doubt.
very special. It's very special. Not that needs to be weaponized against the patient or monetized to the nth degree, but are there different reimbursement mechanisms or systems that could be put into place to be able to reward the relationship that gets created?
Now you're getting into a fun topic. It's this idea of reward versus penalty. How do we put more rewards in rather than deterrence? And have penalties for sure, but there should be consequences, right? I mean, in sports, if you foul someone, they're going to blow the whistle. There's going to be a penalty on the player or the team. but have more of a reward system in place, right? So, I mean, if we're thinking about like basic organizational psychology, I mean, it's like positive reinforcement, right? If you want more of a particular behavior, reward the said positive behavior and you'll get more of that positive behavior, and then how do you elevate said positive behavior? You put higher rewards out there, higher tiers, get everyone reaching, but make sure it's crystal clear on the why. Like hopefully embedded in all of that is so that we have this exceptional, like super healthy, active society, right?
Yeah.
That is, I mean, how would this world be doing if everybody was a lot healthier and a lot more active? I mean, maybe we'd be doing a little bit better, and not to say we're not doing good, but it's all about like, how do we do better?
Well, I think you can look at, and maybe I'll get in trouble for this, and that's okay. But I think you can look at the market for Ozempic and Mounjaro and others in the GLP-1s, and you can get a pretty good idea of what people are willing to pay when I say people, payers, patients, etc., for behavior change, right? And lifestyle modification. So yeah, I think it's the data points are out there
Yeah.
on it already.
Yeah. So, to kind of add to what you're talking about with the value that these PT practices and PTs in general are bringing, is this reward system that rewards those that are bringing even more value and even better outcomes and even more enhanced patient experiences. Like those are the ones we want to recognize so that we get more of those kind of professionals out there and then have more of those kind of patients that are enjoying the exceptional experience with this, the really great outcome, right?
100%, 100%. And as I look at like our company, even if there were better incentives put in place prior to the remote therapeutic monitoring codes, like we would have been around, like we would have been in the fee for service world back when we started the company in 2017, right? But there's not enough margin. There wasn't then. There definitely isn't now. Not enough margin, and so much. Got to focus on like getting the visits in, right? Versus now, where to your point on organizational psychology, now there is a set of codes that are high margin in comparison to a visit that are high margin that reward for delivering care in between visits, right? It's like, well, and what's happening? Holy cow. Like we see practices are doing really cool things with it. We're hearing about decreased hospitalizations because they're able to get in front of things, especially for the elderly population. We're seeing improved outcomes even in fewer visits. It's like, well, it's not rocket science, right? Like it's just like, hey, now we have this system that really just helps us and deliver more care in between visits. And what do you know that does good things? But without the codes, it wasn't ever going to happen, or at least not at the level that it can be incentivized now. So I couldn't agree with you more on if we can simplify the system, there would be a just plethora of benefits, that would just wash a lot of the bad away. And I think there's some trust, there's trust, and there's also rewards, and not just purely leading with penalties, right?
Yeah.
That would help us get an inch closer at least. So
Yeah. So what do we do in the meantime, right? So it's like we let our game do the talking, right? So bring the value now. Find those value stacking moments. Look for ways to be consistent in all of that. Leverage technology, like what you guys are providing now to our industry. Like what a great thing! What a great tool to leverage and increase the engagement with each patient one at a time. So that they're elevating their outcomes. They're enjoying their experience more because of the increased connectivity that they're having. This feeling like someone does have my back. There's this accountability thing because we all need a little lift when we're down. And what's the easier way of doing it? It's leveraging technology, and that you guys have done a fine job with this product to make it about as easy as possible, right? So it's pretty neat. So we have these tools at our fingertips, and then the reward is obviously on the other side is we've got stronger continuity of care certainly increasing, what we can expect on the average reimbursement, which is great. We can reinvest that back into practice, people for development, raises, expanding benefits, resources for, all our employees, but also our patients, our community. So round and round that whole economic circle is reinforced.
I think you're exactly right. And I know for our journey, we still have miles and miles and miles to go. And we're blessed to be serving practices that will provide us feedback to help us get there. Dr. Michael Nula, where can people find you?
A couple ways. They can reach out to me directly via email, mnula@nulatrainingsystems.com, or you can just go visit the website, nulatrainingsystems.com, and find me. So I'm always happy to connect. And, people can jump into a discovery session at no cost, and we can just talk shop, see where you're at, see what you're working on, and see if we might be a good fit to work together.
I appreciate that very much. We do something similar. We call it an RTM impact session. It's like, we don't know if we can help you. Let's just see if there's even a there, right? So I would encourage those listening to take you up on that offer. It sounds like you're like me and get energized from those calls. And so with that, Dr. Michael Nula, I want to say thank you very much for joining me today. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Stephen. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Disruptors. I hope that you were able to take one or two things away that you can apply immediately to your own innovation journey. As always, I'm your host, Stephen Cohen. This is sponsored by SaRA Health. Let's keep moving.